So in this video, we're going to be learning about intervals. An interval is the space between two notes, and there are 3 steps to finding an interval. An interval has 2 parts to it: the quality. So an interval can be major, minor, augmented, diminished, or perfect, and then the quantity, which can be any number 1 through 8. So you can have something like a major second, or a perfect fourth, or an augmented sixth, things like that. So step 1 is the easiest step, I would say. Determine the quantity of the interval. So the first step is determining the quantity, and the way you do this is just by counting the lines and spaces. So you're going to start with the line that the line or space that the first note is on. In this situation, it's a line. So this is 1. Then you go to the next line or space. So this is a space. This is 2. This one is 3, which means that this interval is going to be, we still don't know the quality, but it's going to be some type of third. This interval right here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is going to be some type of sixth. Step 2 is determining the key signature. So the way that I like to think about this is I do it in solfege. So I like to imagine that my bottom note is going to be do. And so in my head, I have to think, what key signature is going to make this note, the bottom note right here, be do? So in this situation, our bottom note is G. And for G to be do, that means that we would be in G major. And the key signature for G major has 1 sharp on the F line. Step 3 to determining an interval is compare the 2 notes that you have with the actual key signature. So we're going to go here. We know that this note, first step, it's going to be some type of third. Here are 2 lines. It's in G major, so there is a sharp on F. Now this would be relevant if this interval involved an F. However, our second note in the interval right here is a B. And in the key signature, there is no B, which means that nothing is changing this note, which means that this interval, because it remains unchanged, is just going to be a major third. Now let's say that instead of this just being a B, let's say it's a B flat. Originally, we already determined that it was a major third. However, it has a flat on top, which is making the bottom note, or the top note, more narrow. So it's squishing the interval, which means that instead of being major, it's going to be minor third. And let's say hypothetically, if we were to flat it one more time, this right here, this is something called a double flat, it would be made even more narrow. So instead of being a minor third, it would be a diminished third. So our next interval, it's another third. It's E to G. So our bottom note is E, so we're going to determine the key in which the bottom note is do. So that key would be the key of E major, which has 4 sharps and is supposed to have a sharp on G. So let's compare our key signature right here to our second note. Here you can see that G does not have a sharp, which means that it has a natural. It's supposed to have a sharp within this key, but it doesn't. So if something is supposed to be sharp and it has a natural, it's the same idea as if a normal note were flat. It is made more narrow. If it were a flat note that was natural, it would be made wider. But in this case, it is a sharp that is made into a natural, so it is narrow, more narrow. So this is making our normal major third more narrow because it doesn't have that sharp from the key signature. It's actually making it into a minor third. And let's say theoretically, if we were to change this natural into a flat, it would make it even more narrow, so it would be an diminished third. Let's do another example with this bottom note. So we're still in the key of E major, and we still have 4 sharps. Let's look at our second note. This is a new note. It is D sharp. So first let's determine the quantity. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This means that our interval is going to be some type of seventh. Now step 2, we already did. We know the key signature. Now this is a D sharp. Now let's look at the key. Is there supposed to be a sharp in the key signature? Yes. So that means that this note, the sharp isn't making it more narrow or more wide. It is in the key signature, so it is quote unquote normal. If you want to think of it in solfege, this is do, and this is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. This right here is ti. If the sharp weren't there, instead of being ti, it would be T flat, which is te, but the sharp is there, so it's T, and that means that we have a major seventh. Now let's say, theoretically, we could do something funky, and instead of doing 1 sharp, we could do 2 sharps, which instead of being drawn like this, it's something called a double sharp, and it's kind of drawn like an X. And that would make this even wider than a major seventh. So instead of major, it would be augmented. We're going to do one more example. First, let's determine the quantity. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our interval is going to be some type of fourth. Now, if the quantity is 1, 4, 5, or 8, then it's going to be the basic quality unchanged is going to be perfect. If it's any other number, then it's going to be major. Now, perfect can be changed, can be made more wide and be augmented, or it can be made narrow and it can be diminished. Major can be augmented, then minor, and then minor can be diminished. So let's go back to our interval here. The first note is F. So the key signature for F to be do is F major, which has 1 flat on B. Now, does this note naturally have a flat? Is a flat drawn in on the interval? No, the flat is not there. So that means that the flat that would naturally be there is not. So the interval is more wide, which means that instead of being a perfect fourth, it would be a perfect fourth if it were like this. Since a flat is not there, it is wider, which means that it is an augmented fourth. So the solfege for this would be do, re, mi, fa. If it were flat, however, since it isn't flat, it's actually fi. So do to fi is an augmented fourth. Fun fact, an augmented fourth and a diminished fifth sound the same. However, they are written differently. A diminished fifth would actually look like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the note is flat because in the key signature, this note isn't in the key signature, so to make it more narrow, you would have to add a flat. If the flat weren't there, then this would actually be a perfect fifth, but with the flat, it is a diminished fifth.